Oh, cripes! I am poorly.
Wow, that sure was crazy, huh? If you are new to the channel, or you haven't tuned in for a while, you might not know that I am making a movie, like a real, actual movie. And what that means, because I'm not rich, that we have to make a trailer first, off of a very limited time and money, and then we, put that together, or I put that together. It's all me. I'm amazing. I've really been manifesting my own ego lately to achieve results. It's going okay, I think, so far. Maybe I'm just not manifesting hard enough. Anyway, do that, and then people are like, wow, this looks so fun. I want to see the full thing. And then they give us money, and then we go and make the full movie. And that I cannot do alone because I'm working with such wonderful people. It's just grand. So, yeah, get excited for that because that trailer is coming soon. So get your wallets ready. Tell your friends. Speaking of wallets, I have a Patreon in the description, and if you want to, give me your cash because you like me or you're nice or both. I have another little movie preamble, but it actually relates to this video, I promise. It's not just me going, oh, geez, I saw this movie the other day and it was fantastic, although, I could do that. I've been working a lot lately, which is annoying because it prevents me from editing the trailer, and it prevents me from making more of these videos, and it especially prevents me from making the videos on my movie channel. But that's coming, don't worry. I will advertise the first one of those on here. And if you're starting to wonder, hey, this video's taking its time, what's up with this? Then you are also very likely new to the channel, and that is both. Well, number one, it is the way that I operate, and number two, that being the way I operate is also part of the point of this video, and it segues wonderfully into this little movie preamble. Okay, so the movie preamble, and again, I must stress that this does have to do with the Pokemon part. So I am a big fan of what is called slow cinema, which is exactly what it sounds like. But a movie does not necessarily have to go to the extremes of, say, Tsai Ming-ling, who has, very slow films. Not long necessarily, but just very slow and, extremely long takes of very little happening, and the camera almost never moves, stuff like that. Doesn't have to go to the extreme lengths of someone like him or Bella Tarr, who his camera moves, but it's all incredibly slow, long takes, and he has a movie that's 7 hours long. It's wonderful. It's called Satan Tango. So I'm a big fan of stuff that's that slow, but there are also a lot of films that influence, what we know as slow cinema now. And obviously, they weren't referred to as slow cinema in their time because that didn't exist, but it was their ideas and experimentation with duration that led to slow cinema. So like a guy like Antonioni, he's one of the biggest forerunners with movies like La Ventura, which is one of the greatest movies ever. It's on YouTube if you're interested. So I would and the point of this being that I just checked out In a Year with 13 Moons by Rainer Werner Fassbinder. I'm sorry if I said his name horribly, because my friend Heinrich is not here to regale you with his wonderful German accent, although I'm sure he'll be back soon. Yeah, and I don't know why he doesn't get mentioned more in that like proto-slow movement, with other guys like Bresson. Because like this and Bitter Tears of Petra von Kant, are really, really pushing it. Long, slow takes. I mean, it's wonderful, of course. So, why am I mentioning, this niche? I mean, I don't want to say it's niche because that implies that it's like too specific to be enjoyed by anyone other than, art snobs. Because, I remember my last girlfriend, we watched Stalker together, which is very slow, and she was really into it. So, all the things she put up with for me. Yeah. Anyway, so it's niche because it's it tests your patience. It's, you know, kind of an extreme. And it's especially extreme now as everything gets faster and faster and attention spans dwindle. So you might get where I'm going with this, but if not, the reason I am mentioning this, you know, hyper artsy, I guess you could call it, because, you know, you need the slowness to really appreciate all the art going on, if that's how you want to look at it. I don't think art is a bad word personally, but I know some people who recoil at the idea of, you know, movies being anything more than entertainment. So the basic idea here, also this battle playing on the screen does relate to what we're going into today. I didn't just pick it because it's cool. The patience you need to really get into slow movies is very related to competitive Pokemon, in the sense that a lot of competitive Pokemon is about being patient. And that lack of patience has bitten more games than I could count, you know, over the years that I've seen, you know, and so many more, you know, before I started playing. Of course, because it's easy to get caught up in, you know, the excitement and the momentum of Pokemon, and you're clicking really fast. And this is not just about, you know, taking your time before clicking your move. Although I have a video on that called 3 Tips on How to Be a Better Battler. But it's related, of course. But I would really recommend the genre of slow cinema and its, you know, adjacent films to anyone who feels like they need a greater level of discipline. I mean, in their lives in general, not just for competitive Pokemon, but it definitely helps in competitive Pokemon, because here's something that I have observed so many times over the years. You know, you'll have someone on your team in a big team tournament, and they'll have a game early on, and they'll be in a good position, and then they'll rush through it, and they'll throw it away over and over and over and over and over again. And I'm sure this happens, you know, on ladder all the time too. And, you know, then you talk to them about the game after, like, hey, you know, I think you were fine if you took your time a little bit. I'm like, okay, next time I'll take my time. I won't, you know, click at the speed of light, things like that. And then over and over and over and over again, they will just click and click and click and click and click, and, you know, then they're throwing away all these games that don't need to be lost, or at least lost the way they were lost. You know, they're just not giving themselves the opportunity to think through everything. So, the idea is that when you ask them, like, why are you not slowing down? Why are you clicking so quickly? A lot of them will say, I don't know, I just can't seem to do it. I just physically cannot slow myself down and stop myself from clicking, you know, at the speed of light and rushing through the games and throwing them away, and, you know, I don't know what to do about it. It gets to the point where if the team matchup is not so automatic that all the decisions are very easy and autopilot, and, you know, that they can just run through them without really thinking about it too much because it's too obvious to miss, you know, even at the speed of light, then they're just not going to get it otherwise. And it does really beg the question, like, this feels like a physical compulsion more than anything else. If you, like, literally cannot slow yourself down to think about it, you know, like, I remember in a lot of tournaments, my teammates and I were, like, begging people, like, look, put a post-it note on your laptop saying, slow down, take 30 seconds per turn. The timer is long, 5 entire minutes, and you get time back if you click quickly on easy turns. Like, oh, I'll set up Stealth Rock with Heatran in front of Ferrothorn. You know, that doesn't need 30 seconds. I mean, if you want to take 30 seconds and think about what's going to happen after, that's great, because then you click less afterwards, or click quicker afterwards, because you've planned for it already. Part of this also comes in knowing your team before a battle, but that's something else. And, you know, experience helps in general. So, slow cinema helps with thinking, with forcing yourself to find that discipline. We'll come back to this game. I just want to have something else playing on the screen. Forcing yourself to have that physical discipline to slow down and just think things through. Because, you know, a lot of time having good Pokemon instincts does help, especially once you have more experience. But no matter how long you play, there are always going to be situations, because the game is so nuanced, that you are going to miss things that aren't there. Because a lot of plays that are not immediately obvious, like you start thinking, oh, I'm going to Stealth Rock, or I'm going to attack, or I'm going to double switch. Switch expecting a switch. It's very limited. And then when you start asking yourself, oh, well, what happens if I switch to this Pokemon on this turn? What happens? Then you start opening up avenues that aren't there. So this is especially important in endgame situations where you might think you're locked into a couple options, but really, if you do something else, then you might have a much better shot at a win than if you just stick to the most obvious. So, and the thing with slow movies, it's, especially in today, I don't want to rail again. I don't have like a problem with people using TikTok or anything, by the way, but I do dislike really, really, some people will say, oh, I physically can't sit still, if something's not happening. It's like, all right, that sounds like something you need to work on in general. Okay, well, I won't go too much into a tangent on that. But I think it's very good to be able to teach yourself that, okay, something is not going to beep and flash and happen and, activate certain areas of my brain, instant gratification type stuff. I know we live on the internet and everything is very immediate and all the time. But if you force yourself to, have that level of discipline and just sit down, you will be not just a better Pokemon player, but a better person in general, or a more satisfied person, or whatever. So, how does that relate to the topic of this video? It took 12 minutes to get to the point. Okay, win conditions. This is a very simple concept. I don't know why it took me that long to find that word. A win condition is pretty much what it sounds like. It is what is going to win you the game, or, advance you towards winning the game. Now, where it gets more complicated is that a win condition is not just going to be one thing, and especially not over the course of a game, based on things that happen. It's not going to be the same every game either, like as much as you might have built your team around a Swords Dance Lucario sweep, there are just going to be games where your opponent happens to have 3 counters to Lucario and it is just never going to sweep. So this is why a lot of the best teams are teams that are flexible and teams that can adapt and that don't put all their eggs in one basket, basically. So because when you get into I think I mentioned this in a recent video as well. Like, you have a lot of teams that look perfect on paper. I have my perfect counter to everything and it's great, but then in an actual game situation they fall apart because they can't adapt. And a win condition can be a Swords Dance Lucario, but it can also be as simple as soon as my opponent's Suicune drops below 40%, then my Scarf Flygon Earthquake will KO everything. So I want to drop Suicune below 40%. I'm throwing a lot of Gen 4 examples at you, but that's the great thing about competitive Pokemon. The fundamentals rarely really change. Whether it's Gen 1 or Gen 9. So it's finding what your opponent's weak spot is and targeting that. And it might change. Your opponent might really... Your opponent might, for example, give away a Pokemon early on that... Like, let's just look at the team preview in this. And I haven't watched this game in a while, or I'm not analyzing it. But let's say that for some reason Nintendi threw away Jirachi and Excadrill and Manaphy, or let them drop to low health early on, right? So suddenly, if Axel's Magnezone is Scarf, it's Choppleberry, but pretend it's Scarf. If Axel is a Scarf Magnezone, then he can just Flash Cannon everything, right? That suddenly becomes more of a win condition. I'm not saying he has to, throw everything else away and just commit fully to that Flash Cannon sweep, but it becomes more of a possibility. You know, as the game goes on, you say, oh, well, now my opponent is more vulnerable to Scar Flash Cannon. You know, or in this game, I guess I'm more... Actually, you know what? Look at this Weavile on the screen right now. Nintendi is very weak to Weavile. You know, there is not a... You know, there's no Dark Resist. And there's no Dark Resist, so CB Knockoff is going to rip through everything. And Icicle Crash is pretty threatening too. You know, it's not even a physically defensive Tangrowth, which you can surmise it being Assault Vest from the fact that Keldeo destroys everything else. So I realize that some of this is Gen 6 specific, but focus on the basic idea, even if you don't know Gen 6, which is that, yeah, Choice Band Weavile is a good win condition here because it threatens pretty much everything very quickly. You know, it's got these super effective hits, it's smacking even the non-super effective Pokemon like Medicham and Excadrill for huge damage. So, actually, it hits 3 Pokemon super effectively, and the other 3 get hit really, really hard by it. So it is a very good win condition. You know, Diancie, for example, isn't a great win condition at first, but as you go, you don't have to start thinking win condition from turn 1, like, okay, how am I going to win this game? You just have to be aware of your options, because and so that when opportunities come up, you notice them. Like if Jirachi and Excadrill dipped, you know, lower health, then oh, suddenly Diancie is a really big threat, for example. So that's the general idea. You know, it really is about adapting. So like to go back to this game, I picked it because this team sets up a Hawlucha sweep, and that is a win condition you have to be very specific about, because it's not like you can just chuck Hawlucha in while terrain is up at any time, because, you know, that's a one-time thing, the unburden grassy seed thing in terrain. That's, you know, once Hawlucha's in, it's, you know, either commits or it's probably not going to get the sweep. You know, I mean, you can switch out, but you're not going to do Hawlucha things in the way it did. So in this battle, Brofist did a really great job of holding Hawlucha back and then unleashing it, and getting the sweep off. Now, he recognized that as a very strong possibility right from the beginning, because, I mean, look at the team preview. Hawlucha outspeeds everything, and it gets a defense boost, so even like a Weavile Ice Shard isn't going to threaten it. So if you just look through the replay again, then yeah, he's setting it up and everything. You know, there's all sorts of adaptations that are going to be made as the game goes on. You know, Greninja's a threat, of course. You know, it's like, hey, look, if I nail some Pokemon with Greninja, then that might change things a little bit. You know, Keldeo is weaker now, and so that helps out Greninja. You know, I'm kind of making stuff up on the fly because I'm not really in, you know, game analysis mode. But this is what good players do. And a lot of the times, yes, if you are experienced with the team and you know the metagame and you know its matchups, then you are going to naturally understand your win conditions. You know, just because your team is built towards them and you just have the experience to, you know, figure it out. But this is why I stress that slow thing at the beginning, that patience, that, you know, taking your time to figure it out. A lot of the time, you know, you are going to miss things that are, you know, like I'm missing a lot in this game right now. I bet there's a bunch of stuff that's happened so far that that has changed the dynamics of each player's win condition, because I'm not paying full attention to it. I'm not, you know, in it. And of course, you're not just going to be navigating your own win conditions. You're also trying to figure out your opponent's, and knowing what your opponent is playing towards is a big part of the moves you make and the plans you make. And like, for example, let's say that you have you have a very threatening Weavile, right? To go back to that Gen 6 example, and your opponent's only check to it is Keldeo, right? So let's say you have Alakazam in against Keldeo. Your opponent is just about never, ever keeping Keldeo in there because... and this goes to risk versus reward, which is, of course, its own thing, its own video. Stay tuned. But if your opponent loses Keldeo, Weavile just sweeps them. Let's just assume that, right? So your opponent will not risk that Keldeo. And I hope you see what I mean. If not, then leave a comment with a specific example, and I will try to explain it. But it's the basic idea. It's Yeah, I mean, it doesn't. This doesn't mean never risk your win condition, obviously, or never risk an important Pokemon. The game's not that simple, but it provides a good springboard from where you can begin a thorough thought process. So you're not just because this happens so much. I'm telling you, people mash their buttons based on what their automatic options are. Based on the most immediately apparent thing. And a lot of the times, that's what leads to matchup deciding things. Not the matchup being too difficult to overcome, but not thinking about the matchup enough and how you can overcome it, and just going through the motions. Yeah, I don't know. I know Pokemon players like to make excuses. That's very natural. But you know how many times I've heard, it's like, oh yeah, the matchup was unwinnable. Couldn't really do much. Not sure what else I could have done. So, you know how many options you probably had? Almost surely, if your team isn't completely terrible, people go, oh yeah, that was a 10-90 matchup for sure, maybe less, and very rarely true. Now, I'm not telling anyone how to play newer generations in particular, but in the first 7 generations, then that's usually not the case. I realize it gets more volatile over time on average, but Gen 5 is famously terrible. Yeah, I had to get that in there. Gonna put how terrible Gen 5 is into my movie. See if I don't. Yeah. So yeah, now Hawlucha's in and is just ripping everything apart. So beautifully timed. Did that Coco even? Yeah. How does he even set it up? He gets Coco in. Oh yeah, he threatens it with the Specs Dazzling Gleam. And he sacrifices, threatens it with Specs Dazzling Gleam. It's at -2, and then he switches to Hawlucha. Basically, almost riskless in setting up that win condition up. And yeah, so that was beautifully done. See, he's like, all right, all I got to do is get Hawlucha in. So look, this Latios is at -2. Look, he sacrifices the what do you call it? The Landorus. Yeah, sacrifices it, threatens it out with Dazzling Gleam, and even gets Draco Meteored. And now, it's scared out, and there's a lot more, obviously, but I do want to get to the main battle from this replay, which I picked, 1, because it's a great game, and 2, because it's a great example of win conditioning. So I'm going off of my memories of what Jirachi told me about it, because he was the guy in the battle. So this is a great example of win conditioning, or win conditions changing over time, right? Because at the very beginning, so you got Marth versus Jirachi, and his name is Papa Don Memeflict because of some jokes relating to conflict. And because this video is all about teaching patience and taking your time and stuff, I'm going to explain it also because it's funny. Because Conflict is a great player. There's no disputing that. It's just sometimes he says things which are kind of funny. And this game is from January 2016. Good lord. And the SPL before 2015. Then I remember he won a GSC game 1 week because he's one of the most dominant GSC players ever, and he just came into the main SPL chat and he just goes, "Another week of perfect plays." Now, he's not unique in this regard. There are plenty of players who will win a game and just go, "Oh my god, I played so perfectly," and I assure you that is very rarely the case. Playing perfectly. Even the most dominant games always have a turn or two that could have been hey, you could have optimized it or whatever. And yeah, but of course he did play very well and won it beautifully and all that stuff. But yeah, he had a habit of saying funny things like that. So there were a bunch of jokes relating to that, which is how Memeflict came about. And I don't remember how Papa Don worked its way into it. Probably some funny in-jokes. I'm sure. This is around the time CTC was talking about how he was, Don Corleone because he had just seen The Godfather for the first time. And Papa... Oh, yeah, I think people were calling Conflict Papa because... I don't know. Because it's an ironic spin on the daddy thing or something. Anyway, so, with that important information in mind, team preview. So, on Marth's end... nothing he has really threatens Jirachi right off the bat. Because Amoonguss checks Keldeo and Thundurus. And something like Tyranitar can help check Thundurus as well, so we can divide and conquer, that kind of thing. Garchomp is going to be thwarted by Skarmory. So nothing really extreme. But as damage spreads and the game evolves, then some of them might become threatening. So you would, in this, if you're Marth, then you say, okay, I need to get such and such damage on Amoonguss, maybe wear down T-Tar, and then Thundurus might take over with agility. Just got to keep it healthy because that Mienshao is going to have Fake Out, but something like that as just one example. And Jirachi has Mienshao as a major threat, but he's also got to contend with keeping his Pokemon healthy, the Weather War, obviously a lot of factors into it. And his Keldeo is Subcalm Mind. That's the biggest thing. That is an enormous threat against a Rain team without Latios, because if Tentacruel is your Keldeo answer and it subs and Calm Minds in your face, then you are not necessarily toast, but very close to it. So, yeah, Garchomp lead, Mienshao lead, because Mienshao is really good. Named after Brofist for some reason. Probably because, I forget, he was annoyed by this Belgian stall player named Mean, who's very good, actually, but he kept using stall, and Brofist kept getting mad at him using stall. That might have been CVB, actually. This sounds more like CVB, getting mad at someone using stall. Yeah, so, U-turns out of Scizor, Skarmory comes in, free Spikes, Tentacruel comes in, and this is actually a great example of being risky with your win condition, because Jirachi switches right to Keldeo, and if that Scald burned, this game gets a lot harder, because that whole Subcalm Mind Keldeo win condition doesn't exist anymore. Sending Keldeo into Tentacruel is already telling the opponent, this is a Subcalm Mind Tentacruel, as opposed to bringing it in on something else, and, Tentacruel coming in, and then you sub, and then you've already gotten the free turn, and then you're starting to run away with it. But yeah, fortunately that Scald burn was avoided, because Scald is a stupid move and should never burn, because it's disgusting. I still gotta make that Scald video. But yeah, that's, so now the Keldeo is going to sub, obviously. And yeah, he was trying to get it on a rapid spin, of course. But Marth went for Scald. I don't think it was to deal with the Keldeo so much as to, maybe punish Skarmory if it was Rocky Helmet. If it was Rocky Helmet and it Brave Birded on the spin and chipped Tentacruel really badly, or maybe he wanted to chunk Tyranitar coming in to try and change the weather, or maybe he just wanted to try and burn Amoonguss. Either way, yeah. So the Keldeo, the Keldeo subs. Politoed comes in. And Hydro's on the sub, misses. Scald burns. Not sure why that wasn't Sword. It doesn't really matter. But if if that was Sword, then that was really dangerous. So a lot of odds going on. Now Scizor comes in on the Calm Mind. U-turn doesn't even break the sub because Keldeo is good. Tentacruel comes in. It's going to break the sub, taking a lot. Rapid Spin breaks the sub and clears Spikes. Nicely done. But, he was hoping that Jirachi would just choke and not sub there. But he's Calm Minding again. He's going to Calm Mind again. Superpower to break the sub. Sub again. Doesn't quite take it out. I don't know if that was a roll or something. But now Keldeo can be forced out. So in comes Politoed, which is just going to sacrifice itself to Perish Song, so permanent sand. So, all these developments mean that now, Jirachi is off to a major advantage. And, yeah, very clear. So what is Marth's win condition? Well, he's got to make something happen with his Scald burning Tentacruel in conjunction with Keldeo and Thundurus to sweep with Keldeo and Thundurus in order to possibly sweep with an Agility Thundurus. Or, his own Keldeo. One of the two. So he's not out of it yet. But so now you see how that win conditions haven't really changed. For Jirachi, Mienshao looks a lot nastier. And, even Keldeo looks nastier because now Tentacruel isn't going to be healing as soon as the sand gets set up. So, there's that. Protect, Secret Sword, he gets a double protect. And now Kelly's going to perish next turn, so Amoonguss comes in, pretty safe. Garchomp comes in. SD's Spore. And here's another great example of win conditions changing over time. Now, this is going to be a Garchomp that's Rocks, SD, Stabs, right? So, if it's not going to be a threat as long as Skarmory is alive, unless exactly what happened, i.e. Amoonguss tried to get a free Spore and it lummed, and now it's going to... and it gets Rocks up. So he could have SD'd again, but if you hit Skarmory with a +4 Outrage, suddenly Garchomp becomes a lot more threatening on its own. And that can contribute to a domino effect. It's not just... because, in a nutshell, okay, Garchomp takes out Skarmory, but then Keldeo takes out Garchomp, and the major players don't really change, right? Potentially. Because you can take out the unimportant Pokemon, but if it doesn't affect the win conditions, it doesn't matter. So, like, if Garchomp KOs Skarmory with Outrage, but then just gets revenge killed right after, and Amoonguss or Tyranitar, i.e. the things standing in the way of Keldeo and Thundurus, if they don't take damage, then that's a favorable trade for Jirachi. And here you see how this dynamic plays into the whole win condition of it all. So, but... if Garchomp gets a big hit on Skarmory, and Garchomp then becomes a threat in and of itself, and it can avoid being revenge killed after, then it can, it can be part of the domino effect. It might not necessarily even be Garchomp damaging Skarmory. It can be Garchomp threatens Amoonguss or T-Tar, and lures in Skarmory, and baits in Thundurus, and Thundurus takes that free turn against Skarmory to damage Amoonguss with HP Ice, or, Keldeo gets to go for a free Scald Burn, things like that. So, the Garchomp, in and of itself, not necessarily a win condition, but as part of the domino effect with its teammates, then it can still be a win condition. So, there's that. And he goes for an SD again. If Whirlwind, no harm, no foul. If Spike, then +4 Outrage. So, Whirlwind goes off, Tentacruel comes in. And now Amoonguss comes in because free Spore. Does it get burned? Does get burned. Spin goes off, Tentacruel sleeps, Garchomp comes in for Amoonguss, or... nope, great move by Jirachi. Since now, nothing really... Keldeo is at least okay against pretty much everything. It's not going on the defensive. Like, if he tried to go to T-Tar there to set up the Permasand. In fact, Jirachi is making the most of his Keldeo being threatening, because in Rain, then Keldeo is more of a win condition, because it has boosted Scalds and it heals, unlike in Sand, which will chip... Sand will chip Tentacruel and Marth's own Keldeo and Thundurus, more true, but it'll also wear away at his Amoonguss, his Keldeo, his Mienshao potentially, but mostly Amoonguss and Keldeo, which is especially important because of Amoonguss's burn. And now... so that was really nicely done, leveraging Keldeo's threat in Sand, and not setting up Sand for the purpose of Amoonguss, because Amoonguss is part of his overall win condition, which is the whole thing of, oh, Thundurus is going to destroy me if I'm not very, very, very careful. So he's got to do everything possible to avoid that Thundurus sweeper, even Keldeo at this point with Amoonguss's burn. So that is an advancement in Marth's win condition. So with that in mind, Jirachi has to make this move to prevent that from going off too far. And Garchomp is a good move because it switches into many Amoonguss forms fairly safely, and it's expendable too. I mean, Skarmory's at 27, but it can then get revenge killed. He might even want this thing to be revenge killed by Landorus, because Landorus would give Keldeo a free switch, or Thundurus a free setup, that kind of thing. It's not just about the Garchomp; it's about what happens after. So Garchomp fairly expendable. He can switch into Amoonguss, see what's going on. Not like he has better options. He doesn't want to sit around with the sleeping Tentacruel to just give Jirachi the opportunity to do whatever he wants. And Jirachi made a good move by remaining aggressive with the Keldeo. So he goes to that. He Scalds. Outrage. Garchomp's going to get taken out. So now Keldeo is less poised to sweep, but it's not really going to get that opportunity because Marth is never going to keep Keldeo or Tentacruel in, really. And he's just going to war it with his own Keldeo, most likely. So if it came to the scenario where it would get a free sub. You just send his own Keldeo and go for it. So, good move there, and now Jirachi still has the Skarmory to sacrifice if need be. So in comes his own Keldeo. Skarm gets sacked there, and it Calm Minds. Skarmory's a good sacrifice because it doesn't allow a sub and a Calm Mind, and Amoonguss can deal with it if it just has one. It was a really interesting move. It goes for a Fake Out. The interesting part of this is that he could have just gone right to Amoonguss and started Giga Draining. That would have been fine. But what's interesting about this is that he could still basically do the same thing, but now the Keldeo is weaker and can be more threatened by Scarf Landorus's EQ. So that is another potential win condition he's opening up. So that's a really, really interesting play by Jirachi. He basically gets a free Fake Out and then switches Amoonguss into it, which is really nicely done. Yeah. So that limits that. And, if Keldeo starts subbing, because, 2 sub Calm Mind Keldeos, that's rare, then it's also even more vulnerable to the Scarf Lando T. And so he basically just has to watch out for the Thundurus, and then that's it. So, now the Keldeo is going to beat down the Amoonguss, but he's still keeping Rain in play. Maybe he wanted to sack T-Tar on that turn. But here he makes a great move, because he goes to Lando, and if Lando, if Lando U-turns and Keldeo switches in, because the T-Tar has, I don't remember if the T-Tar had Chople Berry or not, I think it did, so it can take one hit from this, but you still want to give the Thundurus free turns to do Thundurus things. So here he's going to U-turn, and if the Keldeo stays in, then you just sack T-Tar and put it in Mienshao range. Yeah, because... Oh, no, I see. Because if Thundurus agilities in front of Mienshao, it takes a huge hit from Mienshao, then it agilities, and in Sand it's not healing with lefties, and then Mienshao just switches out and comes back in and fakes it down, and that's the game. So that was a really nice move, because he's playing towards that Mienshao win condition. And if the Thundurus just kills it, then Keldeo, just comes in and beats it and wins. So, beautiful U-turn here, very heads-up play. And if, he tries to avoid that by going to Thundurus, then he just gets U-turned on immediately. And here comes Mienshao, gets the big damage with Fake Out, and now he's just gonna claim. Just got deleted. Good lord. So yeah, that was how you play to your win condition with that Lando. You don't get worried about, oh, well, I'm gonna try and EQ the Keldeo and or U-turn on the Thundurus. No, you U-turn either way and sack T-Tar if the Keldeo stays in, because it furthers the Mienshao win condition. So really, really nicely done. How with the Mienshao he played to that the entire time. And with the Thundurus dead, then now with that extra damage on Keldeo, Landorus is going to clean up with the Scarf EQ. So you see that sort of pincer movement, that win-win situation that he sets up. Like either I'm going for it with Mienshao, but it's not win with Mienshao at all costs, because it wouldn't work like that. And if the Thundurus gets sacrificed, then that's the only thing stopping Scarf Lando from EQing everything. That's something I didn't even mention at Team Preview. Look at how Lando destroys everything except for Thundurus with EQ. So he can work towards that the entire game as well. And, that's what happens. But he's flexible. He's got Keldeo as a threat, he's got Mienshao as a threat, he's got Landorus as a threat. So, barring that, Keldeo into Tentacruel thing, this is a wonderfully, beautifully played game by both sides, actually, and it really illustrates what this whole thing is about. So, thank you so much for watching / listening. I hope this was useful / informative / fun or whatever for you. And yeah, Patreon in the description. Get excited for my movie, and I will catch you in the next video.